In a bustling airport filled with the sounds of travelers and announcements, an elderly woman was preparing for her much-anticipated trip. She was in her early 80s, with soft silver hair neatly pinned back and a warm smile that lit up her face. This trip was special to her, because it meant she would finally get to see her daughter and grandchildren after months apart. The excitement bubbled within her as she thought of all the hugs and laughter that awaited her. She had packed carefully, making sure to include a few treats for her grandchildren, cookies baked from her secret recipe, just the way they loved them. As she approached the check-in counter, she noticed the hustle and bustle around her. Families were rushing to catch their flights, and business travelers were glued to their phones, tapping away at emails. Despite the chaos, she felt calm. Traveling was something she had done many times, and she enjoyed observing people in these busy environments. After checking in her luggage, she moved towards security. The line moved slowly but steadily, and she used this time to take in her surroundings. She admired a group of children laughing together, their parents looking slightly frazzled but happy. The elderly woman chuckled to herself, remembering how her own children used to be that energetic. Once she reached the security checkpoint, she carefully placed her handbag on the conveyor belt, following the instructions of the friendly TSA agents. They greeted her with smiles, and she appreciated their kindness. As her bag passed through the scanner, she noticed a slight change in the agents' expressions. They exchanged looks that made her heart race. Suddenly, she was asked to step aside, and her stomach dropped. A younger agent approached her, explaining that they had detected something suspicious in her bag. Confusion washed over her. What could possibly be in there? She had packed only her essentials and the cookies for her grandchildren. The agent continued to explain that they had found a powdery substance during the scan. The elderly woman felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "It must be a mistake," she stammered. "I don't have anything like that in my bag." The agents remained calm but firm, leading her to a more secluded area for further questioning. She couldn't help but feel vulnerable and scared. Thoughts raced through her mind. Would she miss her flight? Would her family worry? As she waited, she could hear the muffled sounds of the airport, a mix of announcements, laughter, and footsteps. It all felt distant as she focused on the reality of her situation. She began to explain to the agents about her late husband's medication, which she had forgotten in a small container. "It's just his powdered medicine," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear I didn't know it was still in my bag." Her eyes filled with tears as she thought of him, and how she always kept a piece of him with her, even in her travels. The agents listened, their expressions softening as they saw her distress. But the atmosphere was tense, and the situation felt serious. She could see the concern on their faces, which only heightened her anxiety. As they continued to question her, she realized that no one believed her. She felt like a criminal for something she hadn't done. Just then, the head agent decided it would be best to review the CCTV footage to get a better understanding of what had happened. She felt a flicker of hope at the idea that maybe this misunderstanding could be cleared up. She couldn't help but wonder how something so small could turn into such a big problem. Would she be able to explain herself before it was too late? The tension in the air was palpable, and all she could do was wait and pray for a resolution. As the elderly woman sat nervously in the small private area of the airport, she watched the agents work quickly on their computers, looking at the footage from the security cameras. Her heart raced with anxiety, each second feeling like an eternity. She could hear the distant sounds of the airport, the hum of conversations, the rolling of luggage wheels, and the occasional announcement calling passengers to their gates. All of it felt far away, as her focus remained on the agents in front of her. One of the agents, a young woman with kind eyes, turned to her. "We'll get this sorted out," she said softly. "Let's see what the cameras show." The woman appreciated the agent's attempt to reassure her, but fear still lingered in her heart. What if they didn't find anything? What if she missed her flight and didn't get to see her family? The thought of being stuck alone at the airport filled her with dread. As the footage began to play, The agents watched intently. They scanned the images carefully, searching for any signs that could explain the mystery of the substance in her bag. The elderly woman leaned in, her eyes glued to the screen, hoping to see something that would clear her name. Suddenly, she spotted herself in the footage, walking through the terminal, her small handbag tucked under her arm. A wave of familiarity washed over her, but her gaze quickly shifted as she noticed another figure. The video showed her entering a restroom. She remembered that moment vividly. She had gone to freshen up before her flight, feeling a bit tired from the long wait. In the footage, a young man followed her in. He looked rushed and distracted. They both exited the restroom at the same time, and as she hurried to the terminal, she remembered seeing him again in a hurry, his backpack slung over his shoulder. The agents continued to fast forward through the footage. Suddenly, they froze the video on a moment that made the woman's heart skip a beat. There it was, the young man bumping into her as he exited the restroom, seemingly unaware that his backpack brushed against her handbag. The agents' faces changed as they realized what had likely happened. It was a simple mix-up, but it had created a whirlwind of trouble for her. "This is it," the young agent said, pointing at the screen. "It looks like there was a bag exchange." Relief flooded the woman's body, but she was also filled with concern. What if the young man didn't even know about the substance in his bag? She couldn't help but worry about him now, just as much as she had worried about herself. The agents acted quickly, gathering information about the young man from the footage. They noted his appearance and called in a team to locate him within the airport. The elderly woman watched, her heart pounding, feeling a strange connection to this stranger who had unknowingly caused her so much anxiety. She hoped they would find him soon, and that he would understand how this simple mistake had led to such a mess. While they waited, the young agent tried to lighten the mood. "Tell us about your grandchildren," she said with a smile. The woman's eyes sparkled as she began to share stories about her family, how her grandchildren loved to bake with her, the games they played, and how they always managed to make her laugh. With each story, her worries eased a bit, replaced by fond memories. The young agent listened intently, clearly enjoying the stories. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the team returned with the young man. He looked bewildered, and as he entered the room, he immediately recognized the elderly woman. "I'm so sorry," he exclaimed. "I didn't realize what had happened. I thought I lost my bag." The elderly woman smiled gently, relieved to see that he was just as anxious as she was. "It's all right. It was just a mistake." In that moment, all the tension melted away. They were both caught in an unexpected situation, but now they could work together to resolve it. As the young man entered the room, the tension began to lift. He looked at the elderly woman with a mix of relief and concern. "I can't believe this happened," he said, shaking his head. "I was in such a hurry, I didn't even notice I had switched bags with you." The elderly woman could see that he was genuinely upset about the mix-up, and she felt a sense of compassion for him. "It's all right," she replied softly, a reassuring smile on her face. "Mistakes happen. I'm just glad we figured it out before it was too late." The young man sighed, visibly relaxing as he took a seat beside her. His eyes darted to the agents, who were busy reviewing the footage once again. He looked at the elderly woman, curiosity evident in his gaze. "What was in your bag that caused all this fuss?" The woman took a deep breath, realizing she was still holding on to her nerves. "Just some cookies I made for my grandchildren and my late husband's medication," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I didn't know the powder was still in my bag. It's his medicine from when he was sick." She looked down, remembering her husband fondly. "I always carry a bit of him with me, you know." The young man nodded, understanding her sentiment. "I'm really sorry for the trouble I caused. I had no idea I had that powder in my bag." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly embarrassed. "I've been rushing around all day, and I guess I just wasn't paying attention." The elderly woman could relate to that feeling. We all get caught up in our lives. I remember rushing when my kids were young, trying to juggle everything. It's easy to overlook things when you're busy. She paused, hoping to ease the tension. What were you rushing for? Heading somewhere special. He nodded eagerly, grateful for the chance to share. Yes, I'm off to see my sister. She just had a baby, and I'm so excited to meet my new niece. His eyes sparkled with joy as he spoke. It's a huge family gathering, and everyone is so excited. I can't believe I almost missed it. The elderly woman smiled, feeling her heart warm at the thought of family reunions. There's nothing like family. I can't wait to see my grandchildren. We have plans for a big family dinner. I'm bringing their favorite cookies. Her smile widened as she thought about their joyful faces when they tasted the treats she had made. The young man chuckled softly. What's the secret ingredient? I'm sure they are amazing. She leaned in slightly, her eyes twinkling. It's a mix of chocolate and a little bit of love. That's the key. They both laughed, and in that moment, the weight of the situation felt lighter. It was nice to connect with someone, even in such a strange circumstance. Just then, the agents interrupted, assuring them that they were ready to resolve the situation. We've verified that the powder is indeed harmless, one of the agents said with a nod. It was a simple mistake, and you're both free to go. Relief washed over the elderly woman, and she felt her heart race with joy. Thank you so much, she exclaimed, tears of gratitude welling up in her eyes. The young man looked equally relieved. Thank you for being understanding, he said, turning to the agents. And thank you for sorting this out quickly. The agents smiled, their job complete. Just doing our job, one replied. As they left the small room, the elderly woman turned to the young man, a sense of camaraderie forming between them. Let's not let this keep us from enjoying our trips, she said. You go meet your niece, and I'll go hug my grandchildren. Let's make some beautiful memories. He grinned, nodding in agreement. Absolutely. Safe travels. With that, they shared a warm farewell, both carrying with them a newfound appreciation for the unexpected connections that life can bring, even in moments of panic. After the young man left, the elderly woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. The stressful situation had turned into an unexpected connection. She took a moment to collect her thoughts, grateful that the agents had handled everything professionally. With a warm smile still on her face, she picked up her handbag and headed toward the departure gate, her heart lighter than it had been just moments before. As she walked through the terminal, she noticed how lively the airport was. Travelers rushed by, each with their own stories and destinations. Families laughed together, couples held hands, and business people hurried to their gates, their minds clearly filled with important thoughts. The elderly woman felt a part of this busy world again, energized by her encounter and ready to reunite with her family. When she finally reached her gate, she found a spot to sit and waited for her flight. She pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to her daughter. Almost there. Can't wait to see you and the kids. I've got cookies. A few minutes later, her daughter replied with a flurry of emojis that made her smile. Yay, we can't wait either. Bring on the cookies. As she waited, she couldn't shake the memory of her earlier anxiety. She thought about how quickly things could change. A simple mix-up that could have ruined her day turned into a moment of connection with a stranger. It reminded her how important it was to be patient and understanding, especially in stressful situations. Her mind wandered back to her grandchildren. She pictured their faces lighting up when they saw her. The thought of their hugs and laughter filled her with warmth. They were her joy, her reason for every trip. She remembered the last time she visited, how they played games together and cooked in the kitchen. They always wanted to help her bake, and she cherished those moments. Soon enough, the announcement came that her flight was boarding. The elderly woman gathered her things, feeling a sense of excitement bubbling inside her. She joined the line of passengers and felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just traveling. She was going to create memories with her family, something far more precious than anything else. Once on the plane, she settled into her seat, grateful to finally be on her way. The flight attendants greeted her warmly, and she felt welcomed. As the plane took off, she looked out the window at the clouds. They looked like soft pillows floating in a sea of blue. The view was breathtaking, and she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. In her mind, she replayed the events of the day. The worry, the confusion, and finally the relief. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but she realized it had taught her something valuable. Sometimes, life throws unexpected challenges your way, but it can also lead to beautiful connections and stories. As the flight continued, she chatted with the passenger sitting next to her, a friendly woman who was traveling for business. They shared stories about their families, and the elderly woman found herself laughing and feeling more at ease. The journey became less about getting to her destination and more about the moments shared with others along the way. By the time the plane started to descend, she was filled with anticipation. She could already imagine the joyful chaos waiting for her at the airport. The hugs, the laughter, and the sweet taste of her cookies. As the plane touched down, she felt grateful for the day's unexpected turns. Life was unpredictable, but that was part of its charm. And now, with every heartbeat, she felt ready to embrace the beautiful moments that lay ahead. As the plane landed and rolled to a stop at the gate, the elderly woman felt a surge of excitement. She unbuckled her seatbelt, her heart racing with anticipation. Soon, she would be wrapped in the warm embrace of her family, and thoughts of the earlier chaos faded into the background. The flight attendants announced the arrival, and she could see other passengers gathering their belongings, some talking excitedly about their plans. Once the plane door opened, she stepped into the bustling airport terminal, and the familiar scent of coffee and pastries filled the air. People rushed past her, but she was on a mission. With a determined stride, she made her way through the terminal, her heart set on finding her daughter and grandchildren. She scanned the crowd, searching for those familiar faces that brought her so much joy. Finally, she spotted them near the baggage claim. Her daughter stood with a bright smile, and beside her, her grandchildren bounced on their toes, peering over the crowd. As soon as they saw her, the children squealed with delight and rushed toward her. She dropped her bag and opened her arms wide, kneeling down to catch them in a big hug. Their laughter filled the air, and for a moment, everything else faded away. "Grandma," they shouted, their voices ringing with happiness. "You made it." "I did, and I brought cookies," she exclaimed, pulling a small container from her bag. The children's eyes lit up as she opened it, revealing the delicious treats she had baked just for them. They eagerly reached in, grabbing the cookies and stuffing them into their mouths, giggling as crumbs flew everywhere. Her daughter watched, smiling fondly at the sight of her children enjoying their treats. "You really know how to spoil them," she said playfully. "It's my job as their grandma," she replied, beaming with pride. The warmth of family surrounded her, and she felt a deep sense of belonging. After a few moments of joyful chaos, they gathered their bags and made their way out of the airport. The elderly woman took her daughter's hand, feeling grateful for the bond they shared. As they walked to the car, her daughter filled her in on all the things they had planned for the weekend. They had trips to the park, game nights, and even a family movie marathon lined up. Once they arrived at her daughter's house, the woman stepped inside, feeling the warmth of home. The familiar smell of dinner wafted through the air, making her stomach rumble. She was welcomed by the sound of chatter and laughter, and she couldn't help but smile as she took in the scene. The family had set the table with care, and the decorations added a festive touch to the room. The evening unfolded beautifully, filled with laughter and stories. They shared a delicious meal together, and her grandchildren took turns telling her about their days, their eyes sparkling with excitement. The elderly woman listened intently, her heart swelling with love. Each moment felt precious, reminding her of why she cherished these gatherings so much. Later, as the dishes were cleared away, the children begged to play games. The elderly woman joined them, her heart racing with joy as they competed and laughed together. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so alive and happy. As night fell and the stars twinkled outside, they settled down for the movie marathon. Snuggled together on the couch, the woman watched her grandchildren's faces light up with each new film. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, knowing she was where she belonged. In that cozy atmosphere, surrounded by love and laughter, she reflected on the day's journey. The unexpected challenges, the moments of worry, and the chaos of the airport had all led to this, an unforgettable evening with her family. She realized that life's twists and turns, even the stressful ones, often lead to the sweetest moments. And as she nestled into the couch, with her grandchildren beside her, she knew that this was what truly mattered: family, love, and the beautiful memories they created together. The movie marathon continued late into the night, filled with laughter and excitement. The elderly woman felt a sense of joy as she watched her grandchildren's faces light up with every twist and turn of the stories on the screen. They munched on popcorn, their fingers greasy from the buttery treat, and she couldn't help but smile at the sound of their giggles and gasps. It was a perfect end to what had started as a stressful day. As the credits rolled on the last movie, the children started to yawn, their eyelids growing heavy. "Can we watch just one more?" One of them pleaded, but their tired expressions told another story. The elderly woman gently shook her head, knowing it was time to call it a night. "How about we save it for tomorrow?" she suggested. They all agreed, their little faces lighting up with the prospect of another day filled with fun. Her daughter helped her grandchildren brush their teeth and get ready for bed while the elderly woman cleaned up the living room. She picked up the empty popcorn bowls and folded the blankets they had snuggled under. The warmth of the evening lingered in the air, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for these moments. Once the children were tucked in, her daughter joined her in the kitchen. They shared a cup of herbal tea, the warmth of the mugs matching the cozy atmosphere of the home. "I'm so glad you're here," her daughter said, taking a sip. "The kids were really looking forward to your visit." "I was looking forward to it too," the elderly woman replied, her heart full. "It's been too long since I've spent time with all of you." As they talked, they reminisced about family memories, the trips they had taken together, the silly things the children had done, and the lessons they had learned. Laughter filled the kitchen, and the woman felt a deep connection with her daughter. They shared not just family ties, but a bond forged through years of love and support. When the conversation shifted to the challenges of parenting, the elderly woman listened intently. Her daughter spoke about the struggles of balancing work and family life, and how overwhelming it could sometimes feel. "I don't know how you did it when we were young," she admitted. With a knowing smile, the elderly woman responded, "It wasn't easy, but we made it work. Just remember to take things one day at a time and cherish these moments. They grow up so fast." Her daughter nodded, absorbing her mother's words. After their heartfelt chat, the elderly woman headed to her room, feeling content and fulfilled. As she settled into bed, she thought about the events of the day. It amazed her how quickly things had turned around. What began as a stressful experience at the airport had transformed into a heartwarming reunion with her family. The next morning, the sun streamed through the curtains, and the elderly woman awoke to the sound of laughter echoing from the living room. She smiled, feeling excited to join her family for breakfast. When she entered the kitchen, she was greeted with the delightful aroma of pancakes sizzling on the griddle. Her grandchildren were already at the table, their faces eager and cheerful. "Good morning, Grandma," they shouted in unison, their energy infectious. "Good morning, my little chefs," she replied, wrapping them in a warm hug. "What's for breakfast?" "We're making pancakes," one of them exclaimed, bouncing in his chair. The elderly woman took her place at the table, and together they enjoyed a lively breakfast filled with laughter and stories. She watched as they poured syrup over their pancakes, creating little mountains of sweetness on their plates. The simple act of sharing a meal together made her heart swell with happiness. After breakfast, they decided to go to the nearby park. The elderly woman loved the outdoors, especially on sunny days. She packed a small picnic basket filled with snacks, cookies, and drinks while her daughter gathered some blankets and toys. The children were buzzing with excitement, and soon they were all in the car, ready for their adventure. At the park, they found a perfect spot under a big oak tree. The shade provided a comfortable place to sit and relax, while the sun sparkled through the leaves above. Her grandchildren ran off to play, their laughter echoing around the park. The elderly woman and her daughter spread out the blankets, and as they settled in, they enjoyed the warmth of the day. "Let's take some pictures," her daughter suggested, pulling out her phone. They snapped photos of the children playing, capturing the joy of the moment. Each click of the camera immortalized the laughter, the fun, and the love that surrounded them. As the day went on, they played games, had a little picnic, and shared stories under the shade of the tree. The elderly woman felt a deep sense of peace and happiness. This was the kind of day she cherished, full of love, laughter, and precious moments with family. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park, the elderly woman felt a sense of contentment wash over her. The laughter of her grandchildren echoed in the background as they played tag with their friends, their energy seemingly endless. She sat back on the picnic blanket, watching her daughter join in the fun. The sight of them running together brought a smile to her face, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for moments like this. After a while, the children returned, their faces flushed with excitement. "Can we have a snack now?" one of them asked, their eyes wide with anticipation. The elderly woman nodded, reaching for the picnic basket filled with treats. She pulled out the cookies she had baked, and the children's eyes lit up with joy. "Cookies," they cheered, as she handed them each a warm, chocolate chip cookie. The taste of the cookies was as delightful as she had imagined, and she enjoyed watching the children savor each bite. "These are the best," one of them exclaimed with crumbs all over his face, making everyone laugh. As they enjoyed their snacks, her daughter shared stories from her own childhood. "When I was your age, Grandma and I used to have picnics just like this," she said, her eyes twinkling with nostalgia. The children listened intently, eager to hear tales of their mother's adventures. "One time, we even saw a family of ducks," she continued. "We tried to feed them bread, but they were more interested in playing with us." The children squealed with laughter at the thought of ducks waddling around. "Can we see ducks too?" one of them asked, eyes wide with excitement. The elderly woman chuckled and said, "I'm sure we can find some nearby. They might be enjoying the pond." After finishing their snacks, they all stood up, ready for the next adventure. The elderly woman led the way, her heart swelling with joy as she watched her grandchildren run ahead. They reached the pond, and sure enough, a family of ducks floated gracefully on the water. The children squealed again, pointing at the ducks, thrilled to see them up close. "Look at them!" one of the children shouted, clapping his hands in delight. The elderly woman watched as they leaned over the railing, their faces filled with wonder. She felt a wave of happiness at the sight of their innocent joy. "I wish we could feed them," one of the children said, a hint of disappointment in their voice. The elderly woman thought for a moment and then smiled. "You know, we can come back another day with some bread. Ducks love bread." Their faces brightened at the idea, and they spent some time watching the ducks swim around, imagining all the adventures they would have on their next visit. The elderly woman felt grateful for the simple pleasures of life and the memories they were creating together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with beautiful shades of orange and pink, they decided it was time to head home. They walked back to the picnic area, laughing and chatting about their day. Her daughter suggested they make this a regular outing, and everyone agreed enthusiastically. Once they returned home, the elderly woman helped her daughter prepare dinner. They worked side by side in the kitchen, sharing stories and laughter as they chopped vegetables and stirred pots. It felt good to be together, and she loved teaching her daughter some of her favorite recipes. After dinner, they cleaned up together, and then it was time for some family games. The children eagerly set up a board game in the living room, and the elderly woman joined in, excited to play. They laughed and cheered each other on, and she marveled at how much fun it was to spend time together, even in simple ways. As the night wore on, the tired children finally settled down, their energy spent. They cuddled up on the couch, and the elderly woman wrapped them in blankets, kissing their foreheads good night. Her daughter smiled at her, clearly grateful for the day they had shared. "Thank you for being here, Mom. It means so much to us," she said softly. The elderly woman felt a warmth in her heart as she realized how lucky she was to have this family, and she knew she would cherish these moments forever. The following morning, the elderly woman woke up to the delightful sound of birds chirping outside her window. The sun streamed in, casting a warm glow in her room. She stretched and smiled, remembering the wonderful time she had with her family the day before. As she got out of bed, she felt a sense of excitement for the day ahead. After getting dressed, she made her way to the kitchen, where the smell of fresh coffee greeted her. Her daughter was already up, busy preparing breakfast. The elderly woman loved mornings like this, filled with the promise of a new day and the warmth of family around her. "Good morning, sleepyhead," her daughter called out cheerfully, flipping pancakes on the griddle. The elderly woman chuckled as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "What smells so good?" she asked, taking a seat at the table. "Just the best breakfast you could ask for. Pancakes and bacon," her daughter replied, plating up the food. The children were still asleep, and they shared a quiet moment together, enjoying the peacefulness of the morning. Once breakfast was ready, they decided to wake the kids. "Time to rise and shine," the elderly woman sang, her voice bright and cheerful. The children groaned playfully, pulling the covers over their heads. She laughed, remembering how she used to do the same as a child. After a bit of coaxing, the kids finally emerged from their rooms, looking sleepy but excited at the smell of breakfast. They quickly settled at the table, and the elderly woman served them pancakes stacked high. The kids dug in with enthusiasm, their laughter filling the kitchen. "Can we go back to the park today?" one of them asked between bites. "We want to see the ducks again." The elderly woman nodded, loving their enthusiasm. "Absolutely. We can bring some bread this time to feed them." After breakfast, they gathered their things and prepared for another trip to the park. The elderly woman packed a picnic basket again, this time including some bread for the ducks and more of her homemade cookies. The children helped her, their little hands eager to assist. It was moments like these that made her heart swell with joy. Once they arrived at the park, the elderly woman felt a rush of happiness. The sun was shining, and the air was fresh and crisp. The children ran ahead, their laughter echoing as they raced to the pond. The elderly woman and her daughter followed at a more leisurely pace, enjoying the beautiful day. At the pond, the ducks were already waiting, quacking as if they recognized the children from the day before. The elderly woman handed the bread to her grandchildren, who eagerly tore off pieces to throw to the ducks. "Look, they're coming closer," one child squealed, eyes wide with excitement. The ducks quacked and waddled over, creating a joyful scene. The elderly woman watched with delight, seeing the pure happiness on her grandchildren's faces. It was a simple moment, but it filled her with warmth. She snapped a few pictures, wanting to remember this special day. After feeding the ducks, they decided to explore the park further. They wandered along the paths, stopping to admire flowers blooming in vibrant colors. The elderly woman shared stories about her own childhood visits to the park, recounting the adventures she had with her friends. The children listened intently, fascinated by the tales of the past. They found a large open area where a group of kids was playing soccer. The elderly woman's grandchildren begged to join in. Her daughter nodded, saying, "Go on. Have fun." They ran off to join the other children, their laughter echoing across the field. While they played, the elderly woman and her daughter found a nearby bench to sit on and enjoy the sunshine. They chatted about their plans for the future, dreaming about family trips and holidays together. The bond between them felt stronger than ever, and the elderly woman cherished these moments of connection. As the afternoon wore on, they decided to have their picnic under the big oak tree they had visited the day before. They spread out the blanket and shared the delicious treats they had brought. The cookies disappeared quickly, and they enjoyed each other's company, laughing and sharing stories. As they packed up to leave, the elderly woman felt a deep sense of gratitude. Each moment spent with her family was a treasure, and she knew these days would become cherished memories. They headed back to the car, tired but happy, their hearts full of love and laughter. On the drive home, she looked out the window at the beautiful scenery, feeling content. She thought about how the day had been filled with joy, love, and connection. It was days like this that reminded her of the importance of family and the simple pleasures in life. She couldn't wait to see what the next day would bring. As the sun began to set on another beautiful day, the elderly woman settled back into her daughter's home, feeling a wonderful sense of fulfillment. The evening had brought with it a peaceful quiet, and the warmth from their day at the park lingered in her heart. She couldn't help but smile as she thought about the laughter of her grandchildren, their joyful faces as they fed the ducks, and how they played soccer with new friends. After their return, the children were still buzzing with energy, and her daughter suggested they play a family game. "Let's have a game night," she said, excitement dancing in her eyes. The children cheered, thrilled at the idea. The elderly woman felt her own excitement growing. Family game nights had always been a tradition in their home. They moved into the living room, where the children grabbed board games from the shelf. After a quick discussion, they settled on a colorful game filled with fun challenges and silly activities. The elderly woman was always amazed at how these games brought everyone together, creating laughter and joy. The game began with each player rolling the dice, and soon the room was filled with the sounds of laughter and playful banter. The elderly woman watched her grandchildren's faces light up as they completed challenges, sometimes silly, sometimes tricky. They were having so much fun, and she loved being part of it all. "Grandma, it's your turn," one of the children shouted, and she realized she had been lost in thought, smiling at the joyful chaos around her. She rolled the dice and moved her piece forward, feeling a rush of competitiveness. It was her chance to show that even grandmas could be great at games. As the game went on, the laughter grew louder. The children would shout in excitement when someone completed a challenge or made a funny mistake. The elderly woman found herself caught up in the energy of the room. She even got to show off some of her dance moves when a challenge required everyone to perform a silly dance. The kids laughed and cheered, clearly impressed, and she couldn't help but laugh along with them. Eventually, the game came to a close, and they declared a winner, but everyone felt like a champion. It was the shared laughter and the connection that mattered the most. They all collapsed on the couch, breathless and happy, their cheeks flushed with excitement. "Let's take a picture," her daughter suggested. The elderly woman eagerly agreed, knowing these moments were worth capturing. They all gathered together, squeezing tightly on the couch, smiling brightly. Her daughter clicked the camera, capturing their joy in a single frame. It was a picture that would remind them of the love they shared on this special night. After the game, they decided to wind down with a movie. They all piled into the living room, blankets draped over their laps, as they scrolled through their options. The elderly woman suggested an old classic, a film she loved when she was younger. "This one always makes me laugh," she said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. As the movie played, the elderly woman felt a wave of nostalgia wash over her. The familiar scenes and laughter brought back memories of her own childhood, watching movies with her family. She glanced at her grandchildren, who were engrossed in the film, their laughter mixing with the sound of the movie. It was moments like this that filled her heart with happiness. After the movie ended, the children began to yawn, their eyes growing heavy. The elderly woman smiled, knowing it was time for bed. She helped her daughter tuck them in, kissing them good night and whispering, "Sweet dreams." As she walked back to the living room, her heart felt light, knowing they had shared another unforgettable day. Once the children were asleep, she and her daughter settled down on the couch. They shared a cup of tea and talked about the day's adventures. Her daughter expressed her gratitude for the time they had spent together, and the elderly woman shared her own feelings of happiness. "Days like this remind me of what really matters," she said softly. "Family and love are everything." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and laughter, until their eyes grew heavy and they realized it was time to rest. The elderly woman felt a deep sense of peace as she headed to her room. She knew that every moment spent with her family was a treasure, and she couldn't wait for the adventures that tomorrow would bring. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought about all the memories they had created together. Each laugh, each hug, and each shared moment felt like a beautiful thread woven into the fabric of their family, and she was grateful to be a part of it all.